conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Jess.
Hello, world.
And Alex.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. I'm loving being back.
Oh, hopefully we don't have to pay out any royalties for that.
It was pretty on point.
Theft.
That's good.
Yeah.
It's very. I mean, those algorithms are getting very good at picking up copyright material.
Yeah.
They can probably.
You guys know where that's from, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sherwin-Williams. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Is that their
They're always
jingle?
trying to get some.
Sherwin-Williams.
I
Yeah.
don't, is that it? No.
No.
I know. Say big money at Menards. That's the jingle I know. I'm trying to think of other jingles.
So many jingles. I wonder. We should probably look this up. If Christ Community Church ever had like a jingle, I bet
it needs one.
I bet in like the 80s at some point, like we were looking through all the archive stuff last year, and I feel like there was one video.
Yeah.
It had a little sound.
And it had like a little,
What, can you
because there's more of
give
like
us
a
a little
commercial,
bit?
like Christ Community Church. It's a church for your family, and it had like I think it was like a commercial, and a lot of like drone-looking shots before they were, and it was before
What
its
did it
time.
sound like? Was it
let's
little-
explain what a drone shot is before it were. I don't know what that means.
I feel like someone probably had like a paint
helicopter?
stick.
It's like a giant selfie.
That
giant-
is before their time.
yeah,
Some
giant
creative
selfie
angles
stick
and shots. Wow,
it
you
just
can't-
took a lot more work to get that
You
Yeah.
can't knock them for trying, you know?
back in the day.
Well, we should work on that. That should be our like an ad campaign for Christ Community Church. We'll get a jingle. I'm sure Ryan Shields will be on that. He's a great jingle writer.
Yep.
I personally like the music for our podcast.
Oh,
It's just catchy. Gives
yeah.
me some good vibes.
Yeah.
Sundays out of context. That's got a good.
Yeah, that
that's
does.
got
That
a
was
good
a Ryan
jingle to
Shields
it.
original
Yeah.
there. So
Good old
follow
Ryan.
us on TikTok if you want to know more about Sundays Out of Context. We're back from a little bit of a summer break. We were gone for about a month, so there's probably been a lot happening in our personal lives. If we want to catch up for a quick minute here, anything exciting that went down over the past month while we were away from our podcast friends?
I'd say for me, the highlights were family went to Colorado, so we had a good trip there, Estes area. I got to go to Camp Rivercrest, and so a lot of CCC faithful have probably heard of Camp Rivercrest. Hang out in a junior high week there and speak and be the teacher, and it's just a good reminder. It was a good reminder for me that of the next generation that sometimes we feel like is incompetent or can't connect with Jesus. One, it was a reminder of like, man, when students get outside of into nature and just kind of unplug from their devices, and I was able to do that too a little bit more than normal, then there's just something that is unique and God can speak to you in different ways. But and it's the only place like you'll see middle school boys crying and hugging each other and like doing all the things that is not middle school boyish or tough guyish, that they feel like they have to be. And so just walls come down and stuff like that. So that was a lot of fun. And now gearing up for sending all of my children to school.
Wow.
So that's kind of crazy. Got a kindergartner this year. So, and then second grade, we got the email. And the kids are in school. They started. So it happened. And so pray for my heart and mostly my wife's heart because sending our 3-year-old, so she, if you didn't know, has some special needs as far as hearing. So she's going to a special school. That's half day, but just full of only kids with cochlear implants learning speech and ASL.
Wow.
And so, but that's like 2 years before you're ready to send your kid to school. And then she's going on a bus from like, from our house in almost the Gretna area all the way to Ralston every day. So
Oh, boy.
a lot of changes,
Yeah.
and it's kind of crazy to be. We're not empty nesters, but
But it
Not
is
by a long shot.
it is a different feeling
it's like
to kind of
especially when that's like unexpected.
Yep.
The metaphors for kids are weird. Like your quiver's full or your nest is empty. Can we just like land on one metaphor?
arrows and nests.
So boom, there's my quick highlight reel.
Yeah, no, that's good. Jess, what have you been up to?
I'm trying to. I feel like a lot has gone on. My littlest sister, Brianne, is moving to Florida. So she moved in with us for the summer. So that's been really fun, just getting to spend some of her last weeks in Omaha with her in our house. I also feel like I have played more Pokemon Go this summer than I have before because like I'll walk or run to work out, and my son is like, turn on Pokemon Go because when you move distances, you can hatch eggs.
Yeah.
So now I'm like, every time I'm walking somewhere, I have to open it and like, can I hatch an egg? So yeah, doing
I had
that.
that phase
That's probably
for a while
more
for my son,
that
too.
people wanted to hear about that. But then we went to very cool. We road tripped to Kentucky and went to the Ark Encounter.
Hung out with my buddy Ken Ham.
I know, your BFF.
Yeah.
Did you recruit him? Is he coming on the pod?
Yeah, I couldn't find him. I tried to hunt him down, and we went to the Creation Museum. Really cool. I think going places like that, obviously, like people have different views on creation, Ark, all that stuff. But it's just interesting to be in. Like my husband and I had conversations that we wouldn't necessarily have had. Like I don't necessarily say, "Hey, what do you think about 7-day creation or old Earth?" Like, but it was just interesting to be in that space and have.
Wow, your premarital counselor just didn't cover everything.
I
huh?
know, right? What was going on? So it was very cool to see a life-size replica of the Ark.
Were there any animals in it?
There's fake animals. And I will say things are really well done. It's not like, oh, I don't want to dog on anybody. But you know how like you go to Vala's and everything's a little like
no. Don't hurt Vala's
it's
feelings.
sentimental, but it's not
Yeah.
necessarily like, wow, that's like an awesome dragon. I feel so
Wait,
bad.
there's
I just
dragons
said
on
that.
the Ark?
No, but there's like
Ken
dinosaurs.
Ham has gone way off the deep end now. Wait,
But,
there's
I mean,
dinosaurs on the Ark?
There was. There was some
I
little
didn't know.
dinosaurs.
I didn't read that.
I know.
In the scripture, I need to
Yep. Yeah,
brush
look
up.
that up.
Brush up.
Isn't that yeah? So anyways,
Our origin series.
they were all really
Did me
well
wrong.
done.
Wow.
So
That's cool. But you didn't. Is there like video of Ken Ham like welcoming you or like
No,
Walt Disney
there was
or
no, like,
anything like that?
holographic-
Oh, okay.
no holographic images. Like I couldn't even like take a picture with a cutout.
Okay.
Just
All right.
there, but it was
Eric
fun.
is so
it's
disappointed.
fun. It's fun road tripping with.
Ever
our
since you got
kids.
blocked by him on Twitter.
I haven't yet. I've tried, but I haven't yet. He doesn't block me. He doesn't care. That's cool.
Okay, and I will say one more thing as
Yeah.
far as like leveling up parenting. This was the first trip I have been on since having kids. I did not bring a stroller.
Whoa.
That's a big deal to me.
Wow. All the kids are just at the age where they can
They can walk on their own.
walk it. Yeah, that's exciting stuff.
How about you, Eric?
yeah.
How's
Leveled
your
up.
summer?
Mine was good. It's been July's been kind of a wild month all across the board. Lots of lows and highs, and we my wife and I went to Orlando, hung out there for a life conference, which was a new experience for me. If you're not familiar with that, that's like the National Christian Missionary Alliance Youth Conference that happens every 3 years. So I was asked to be part of their social media team, and that was a lot of fun. It was a long, 12-hour days and that sort of thing, but still, it was just a lot of fun to get to meet new people in the alliance, and just. I think so many times there's that trope of the next generation, whether it was Gen X or millennials or now Gen Z or even younger, but it's just they're not whatever, what are we gonna do? Our world is in the hands of this next generation, But it's just refreshing to see kids who are still chasing after God and wanting to include Him in their lives, and I think that's really exciting to me.
What would you
to
say
see.
to sum up your week was a highlight for you, or a couple highlights?
I have one. And while you think, I remember
okay.
you were just Instagram living from the life conference. You were kind of like
Yeah.
the
You were
social
fun.
media host
Yeah.
at the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I was just watching one, and a guy recognized you from the podcast.
Yeah,
That was
that's
cool.
true. Yeah, that is true.
So because he lived in New York or something.
Yeah, the Rob Reimer episode.
One
yeah,
of his friends.
Yeah, so that was. I mean, it's a small world, and so you just run into people all over the place. That was really fun. I mean, I got to kind of drag John Stumbo around with me for one video and asked people if they could tell me who this was for $1, and. I mean, it
That
was
was funny.
I mean, I got to interview him about his story on the podcast, so it was just a cool connection there. But some of that stuff was just really fun to do.
And
But
he's
yeah,
the president of our
president of the
denomination,
Alliance.
if
Sorry,
people don't
yeah.
know
Yeah, you
that
can
are
Google
listening.
that.
You're not getting $1 though.
No, you're
We
not
told
getting
you.
$1. So I don't know if I have this the one moment. I got to even like be part of a seminar that I taught on social media and talked to that sort of stuff. That was really fun to have these high schoolers asking so many pertinent questions in their lives, and just seeing where they're at, and that they're all very grounded in a lot of ways. And I think it's encouraging when you just hear the other side of that argument so many times. So hung out there for a week, about 4 or 5 days extra after the conference, and my wife and I went to Universal Studios, and she's a theme park fan, and I'm a fan of my wife, so I went to Universal.
It works out.
Yeah. So yeah, we hung out there and saw all the Harry Potter land and all of the things. I went on the Velocicoaster.
Okay, I was going to ask if you went to...
which was horrifying, and I won't do that again. Not a fan. So yeah, I mean, you know, you have your limits, and you do what you do. That was fun. On the downer side, our dog that I've talked about before. We had the I forget his name now, and I feel terrible. You know, the vet.
Oh, Jerry Busselman.
Jerry, yes,
Dr. Jerry.
Dr. Jerry Busselman. He was on, you know, and he's talking about my bulldog and all that stuff. So you've maybe heard about her before, but Hermione had her for her whole life, which isn't long because bulldogs only live 8 to 10 years, and she was 10 years old, so she was up there in that thing, and it's quite the experience going through. We've lost dogs before, but this was the first time that like we had to take her to the vet, and like while they put her to sleep, and my wife and I are there through it all, and then also on top of that, trying to make sure the kids are at a place like feel good about saying goodbye, and that we're not, but also not making them feel like they're making the decision to kill the dog. You know, that was like in the moment I'm realizing I'm asking, is it okay if Daddy takes the dog? You know what I mean? It's just this weird thing of, I'm not saying you're responsible for this, but I want to make sure you feel good about saying goodbye, and just gain a lot of perspective, because I think a lot of times you see people grieving for pets, and you're like, oh, that's just an animal, whatever, you know, get over it. You kind of have that. Sometimes it's easy to have that attitude about it. And I think it just felt so much more like she was part of the family. And so you're just like, I am like immediately washing her dishes and hiding them in the basement because I can't, you know, because it's just like little things like that are just like breaking your heart. So you're hiding all the stuff. And then you feel like, it's a dog. Am I dishonoring it? But I still feel like, I don't know. It's a mess. It isn't a mess of emotions that you go through. So that all of those things, highs and lows, that was kind of my.
But she did get to have chocolate before she passed. I thought that was like an interesting.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So that's the thing. There was a jar at the vet that said kisses from heaven, and it's Hershey Kisses, because it's like it says, well, you can't go to heaven without tasting chocolate. And for one, I'm like, well, theologically, is there chocolate in heaven or not? And then like the animal thing. I mean, we always get those questions whenever there's a Q&A.
We can ask Mark.
Yeah, we'll ask. But yeah. So the problem though here, and you brought this up, so I'm going to address it.
Let's address it.
It's the dark side of this is the part of the reason that like her throat and everything was like part of the reason she was like we had to put her down, because she couldn't swallow very well anymore. And so we're giving her like little tiny pieces of chocolate, and she's so excited, but then she's struggling, and she's like struggling to swallow it. And so it was this whole ordeal, you know? And so, it's just all over the place. It was, I won't get into the gruesome details. That's not quite how you presented it on
social media. So
no,
I didn't know
we get to the real.
Yeah. On the Uncomfortable podcast, we're going to make it uncomfortable. But
we're going to talk about it.
Yeah. It was just a bad experience overall. But I mean, it's something we'll all grow from as a family, and but that sums up my month of July.
That was like riding the Velocicoaster, a high and a low, and I'm like feeling.
I don't know if I want to get back on it.
Sorry,
I literally could cry.
I cannot say I've ever cried over an animal that much. I just things would just trigger it, and I would just be like sobbing. I'm like, what's going on?
I mean, even I saw your picture on social media, and I'm like emotionally invested in this dog, because I just know how much your whole family is animal lovers anyways, and it always kind of comes up in conversation. We get attached to our animals. I'm sorry, Eric.
No, it is what it is. We're all learning from it. So
So we're back.
Those are our updates.
We're back.
We're back.
And it has been some time, so thanks for sharing those updates. What I was curious about, just in, kind of our banter, what do you think is the greatest comeback of all time?
Making the impossible
I'm going to put one stipulation on it. Okay. Jesus died. He rose again. He came back.
Took mine.
There it is. Okay. Give us the umbrella of grace, everybody. We said that is it. It's the GOAT.
I feel
it's
like
the best.
that's a given. We know.
That's the greatest
But I
comeback.
just, if we don't say that, somebody's going to come at us and be like, are you kidding me?
Yeah,
it's going to be your dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Come on, Phil.
He wouldn't, and I'm only saying that because he wouldn't let us down. He would call
us out on that.
Yeah.
Never fails. Never gives up.
I think there's so many uses of the term. A lot of time it's sports things. People are going to think of sports or are like a comeback to an insult.
So
or
you
like
choose
a
your,
fall from
choose
grace
your,
and then
it could be anything.
Yeah.
Right? It
how
could be
you
any of
heard
those
it.
comebacks.
if you're like, that's the best comeback of all
Like
time.
the Szechuan sauce from McDonald's when that came back for a little while.
McRib.
The McRib.
Every year
that
comes
comes back. Yeah, every year.
But I think of like NCAA football is coming back soon.
The game,
because
the video game.
A lot of the NCAA games they couldn't play anymore because of
yeah, or like
name, letter, intent, or name, letter, image, likeness.
That's
yes,
it.
or I think like celebrities like wasn't it Robert Downey Jr. That was like into drugs and like went to rehab and now he's Iron Man and they come back. Sorry if that was somebody's. Was that yours?
No.
The Police, the band, not the police, the cops, but the Police. They didn't really break up. They just went away for a long time and then they came back.
Yeah. So I'm gonna, probably no surprise here, gonna go with a sports moment, and there's so many. Obviously Michael Jordan leaving the Bulls and coming back, but I'm kind of into the conspiracy theories that maybe he was suspended or something like that, and that's why he left, and so it wasn't like
I watched the Last Dance
I
or
know,
whatever.
I know.
And they didn't say any of that in there.
I know. So,
wow, that he really is.
You have
conspiracy
the
theories.
Cavs came back on the Warriors to win a championship. But
we have no idea what you just said.
So many sports things that I'm not going to get.
2004.
Was that a year? Okay.
2004, you had Boston Red Sox. They also made a comeback
yes,
against
thanks. We need more
the World
context around what you're
Series.
saying. That's good.
And there was the
That's
bloody
good.
sock, Roger. I don't remember the name
Infamous
of the
bloody sock.
Yeah.
Okay.
this
I'm gonna
is
have to
weird.
Who's the
Google
name
that.
of the pitcher? Oh,
He
Kurt
got a
Schilling.
bloody sock
Kurt
from,
Schilling had a
from
bloody sock.
pitching.
Well, he tore something.
Oh.
And then you got what I'm gonna say, maybe at least in sports, is Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods won a major last year, and I just never. This is before before the injury.
That was the greatest comeback, you think?
I mean, Tiger Woods.
I would not have called that.
As someone that you have to root for redemption. The guy, his life was a mess, and probably this personal story because I went to one of like the last. So Tiger Woods never had lost a major on like the last day, if you know what golf is, And so one of my buddies, Zach, and I, we drove up.
Eric looks so intrigued now.
We drove up to Minnesota because it was guaranteed if Tiger Woods had a lead on the last day, he would win. And he lost that day. And then the next week, his whole life, his wife was hitting him with golf clubs. They found out he was cheating on her. Like his life was a wreck. But I think since then, as a father, he's maybe come back. Their marriage didn't come back, but then he hurt himself a lot, and he came back and won a major, which a lot of people thought he would never do.
So you're saying there was like life redemption that was happening?
Life redemption,
not just
career redemption.
Okay.
But I thought he'd never win a major again, and he did it. So to me, maybe that's one of the greatest of all time. So,
Jess, comebacks.
Wow. I feel like I'm just going to go with the first thing I thought. So I thought about the Kentucky Derby this year. And
wow.
I'm telling you, every time I watch that video, I get goosebumps of the announcer like screaming. It's like,
wait, is that horse racing?
That you haven't seen
yes,
that?
You have to, Eric, you have to watch it. And if you guys haven't seen it, you have to Google like the Kentucky Derby. It is called like the greatest horse comeback of all time.
It's crazy.
It's
Kentucky
like 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Maybe not the best
It's
2 minutes
wild.
and 30 seconds of your life, but
No,
it
it
is
is.
close. It's
Are you guys?
It's
I didn't know
awesome.
you guys were such horse racing fans.
I'm not.
I'm not
This is
either.
like
You're
It's
down at the
incredible.
track
This is
every
inspirational.
weekend, placing
is.
some
It is.
bets
Inspirational.
on the ponies.
It's almost like I had like goosebumps, and like
Yeah.
I was this close to tears just because it's like.
Because that little
And I
jockey
probably
man
think too
got his
deeply
horse
about
to go
things,
real
but it's
fast.
like, man, that's me
Well,
at
I
certain
mean,
stuff. Or
backstory,
that's-
like the horse that did this was
We're getting
like another
hyped.
horse got disqualified that day, and so they just like threw another horse in there just because they needed to have enough horses, and
incredible.
that thing got its giddy up on.
It did.
I just never thought we would be talking about horse racing on this podcast. It's crazy though. I mean, I don't. Is it? Are people watching this? Like, is
Yes.
that
I mean,
thing?
it's the Kentucky Derby.
Yes.
Too.
That's like a
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yes.
that's the thing I've heard of.
It's like what, 2 or 3 minutes?
yeah. It's. I mean, it's worth it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm.
That's about how long the race is.
Was it the Rich Strike? Was that the
Rich
name
Strike,
of the horse?
yes.
And then it was racing against a horse named Epicenter.
Yeah.
I thought the horse. Yeah.
I'm watching it. Okay, he's
No, we can't. You have to
He's
listen to
literally
it, Eric.
coming
I
back.
can't even.
Yeah.
You have to
from
listen
the
to
back
it.
of the herd of the ponies.
Yep.
I feel like
And-
we should just pause this
okay,
right now.
I'll watch
Yeah.
it later.
And
That's
then
good.
Do you
yeah.
want to pause it and then he watches it and we come back?
Yeah.
No,
Let's
come
no,
back
No,
Can we
to our
please do
comeback
it?
no,
episode.
we're not doing that. I'm sure it's good. It's a movie. It's exciting. I believe you, Jess. I just am surprised that it was a horse racing thing. I always
right?
have just kind
I
of
know.
categorized that as like things that people
What would
like
you
to
have
do
thought
to,
I was going
to
do?
gamble.
Because I
on-
was
on
betting
it.
Michael Jordan or Justin Bieber
Yeah.
somehow on.
Oh,
Alex.
Bieber is back as well.
Yeah.
Which is good news.
I assumed maybe it was like a Husker thing. I didn't know.
Me?
Yeah. Are you not a Husker fan?
Oh.
Okay.
That's
I was
Alex.
at the Nebraska
Sorry,
Ohio
I
State
do. I
game
do enjoy a nice.
where they came back.
a Husker game, but it's more-
2015.
Okay. Well, there's some great comebacks in there. I don't know if I have. Like, I'm trying to think of some. I named a few.
The Kansas Jayhawks this year at halftime
Oh.
and coming back
Okay.
to winning the national
Oh, yeah.
championship. That was a pretty impressive one.
What about?
I saw like a clip of that, so I'm familiar.
What about jokes? You got it. You brought up jokes. You got it. The best like
Okay, what about
someone
this?
tweeted something out and then someone
like-
clapped back. I think that's what the kids call it these days. It's not a comeback.
You
it's a
hear
clap
that?
back.
We're not
That's
that old.
You hear that? That's the sound of
Okay.
me not caring.
Eric, what about this? Was there
About the
something you
Kentucky
loved as a
Derby.
kid that Dexter likes?
Oh yeah.
That you are like, this is so fun to do together.
Pogs.
Pogs? No, they haven't made their comeback yet.
You know what I mean?
Pokemon
Like
cards?
that's what
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I mean,
'Cause
there's
you
a
do lots of
lot of
fun stuff with your
nostalgia
kids.
stuff.
Yeah.
but I don't know.
Corduroys.
Corduroys.
Lego.
Definitely not bell bottoms. Those aren't. Ninja Turtles have always kind of been around. They like left, then they came back, then they left, and they came back, and they always make a good. I don't have anything. I think we've spent enough time on comebacks
Okay.
though. But yes, that I think I'll just say Szechuan sauce was the greatest comeback ever, and people were excited about it. And then they realized it wasn't that good in the first place after they tried it. So. That does it for this. It was a little extended banter time. You know, we figured it's been a while.
Well, we missed each other.
We
Gotta
needed to
hear-
catch up.
Yeah.
And we want to know what yours is. What is your favorite?
Yeah. Anyone listening, send us an
Yep.
email, comment if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook. Let us know the greatest comeback.
Tell us why we're wrong.
Tell me why I need to get into watching horse racing.
Yep.
I need to know why.
You're gonna be in after this
Yeah.
episode.
Emotional.
Yeah. All right. Up next, we are going to be talking about kind of a hybrid topic. We're merging the two. The headline being the new Mental Health Hotline. So we'll be talking about that next. All right. Back in July, I started seeing headlines popping up all over social media and a lot of my feeds about the new mental health hotline changing to 988. I mean, since then, they received 96,000 calls, texts, and chats in the first week. I mean, it's interesting to me that this didn't exist before. I mean, they had the suicide line, but
Yeah.
it was like this number that I don't
Yes.
even remember. Like, I'd have to go search it out. So the fact that this is a much more easy to remember, like already, I would know what to tell someone now. So yeah, this is a topic that we thought we'd discuss a little bit, maybe bring some awareness to it if you hadn't heard about it. Um, but why do you guys think this is so important? I mean, besides the obvious facts.
I think it's always important to make things like this as accessible and easy as possible. So we're using one number to call or text. It's easy to remember. If you don't want to talk, you can text. And I think it's so important because we're simplifying. It's also like one of those things that people are so in the moment and feeling so hopeless in a moment of feeling suicidal. You can't really think of much more, and it's hard. If you tell somebody, it's overwhelming for them. So I think simplifying it and streamlining it, and obviously it shows if 96,000 people have called, that's to me saying, okay, this needed to happen. Like, this was the right move. Like, we're looking at demographics and saying we need to make this more accessible to people. And so I think that much needed.
Yeah, when I was looking it up, it said that suicide's the 12th leading cause of death in the U.S. And I mean, it seems like sometimes it just seems like this would be one of the more preventable things, even, and it's just sad to think that, okay, this is that high in the ranking of leading causes of death. And it almost feels like we're not taking it as seriously as it is presenting itself to be at this point.
Yeah, I think obviously there was a number before that was established in 2005. And I mean, I've just run across, probably too many posts on Facebook. I've talked about earlier this summer doing a funeral of a young man who committed suicide. And I've just seen too many, posts on Facebook over the last couple of years, especially in response to suicide. And a lot of times, it is people that are like, if I would have known, then I would have been there to help you and that kind of stuff. And I think one of the big barriers probably, I mean, the suicide hotline has been around, but like you said, it was a pretty random 1-800 number with not even like a lot of like...
Yeah, it was 1-800-273-TALK.
Yeah. And so not super accessible, 911, you just know, like even from when I was a kid, 911 has kind of been one of those numbers that you knew. I remember like my basketball got stolen, and I remember like being 5. One of my early memories was calling 911 and telling like
it's annoying and cute at the
telling
same time.
the operator that my basketball was stolen, because that's what I thought you did. And so just creating that awareness, I think, in people for the mental health hotline, and it's for suicide prevention, but I also think it's a thing you're able to use because there's real people on the other end of this line, either texting or calling. And I think it's also a resource that you're able to use if you are with somebody, or you've got a text from a friend or whatever that you are worried about is having a mental health crisis right now or struggling with mental pain. They're also available to talk you through how do I begin to help support these types of this behavior. Hey, I had a friend just text me, and there's nothing more lonely and maybe isolating than feeling like somebody called you and they're angry or they've got something happen in their life. They're like, I just might, I have no reason to be alive. I might kill myself. There is a very real burden that you feel like, what am I supposed to do in this moment? How do I respond? I don't want to make this worse for that person or say something that, helps, their cause or whatever. And so you're able to also have conversations in that way, not just as a person that's like, or you can call and have someone check, a well check through this number instead of 911. And so I think we've even seen, recently, and we talked about this with one of our guests, that all of our police aren't necessarily trained to go do a mental, health awareness kind of check, because there's so much that goes into mental illness and the situations that they might walk into. So we've talked about, we've got a crisis intervention, team that meets, and they do a lot of training for our local police that meets at Christ Community often, and they've talked about this. And so I think it'll hopefully address a lot of those things, whether you're feeling suicidal and it's just an easy, okay, 988, I know that I'm struggling. I just need to call and find reprieve and somebody that I can talk to at that time, somebody that needs a lifeline to help somebody else. Or if you're really actually concerned about, somebody, committing suicide, it'll get the right types of people, I think, to be able to respond in those moments. So I think all of those reasons is why it's really critical to kind of raise an awareness about this. Because I think everybody knew what the suicide hotline was. I think most people knew that it existed.
Yeah.
If you asked anybody how to call it, I don't even want to put a percentage on how many actually knew the number, but not very high.
I also don't think that people understand that you can use I really like the Boys Town National Hotline too, because they are directly connected to the local police and the 911 operators. But I think people don't understand that it's for suicide, but it's also for veterans, for lost survivors, attempt survivors. They have like deaf and hearing loss resources, bilingual, just a lot of different things, disaster survivors. So it's like you can use this. You don't have to be, and I feel like this is like my mantra. You do not have to be at a lowest point or know somebody at a lowest point to reach out to something like this, or for help. I mean, these people are so smart and well trained. I've talked to people that work at these hotlines, and they go through incredible training, and they help funnel and streamline issues directly to people that are connected to the issues. And especially with the national hotline that we're talking about, the 988, they you could call or text, but it might not be somebody in Omaha that you're talking to. You could be talking to somebody in Louisiana or Texas. It's a huge network that's spread across the country for support. And so I just think it's cool that people are able to use their gifts in this way as well.
Well, and do you think it's something like, an unmarked intersection eventually gets a stop sign, maybe eventually a traffic light or whatever, because accidents start happening, and it seems like that's kind of the way we operate in our society, is we kind of wait until it's reached a critical mass, and then we implement the thing to help. And do you think that's why it's taken this long to? Because I can't imagine the solution of a shorter, easier to remember number couldn't have been a possibility before. I mean, you had 411 for information, 911 for emergencies. So I just wonder, what is it? Just because we're starting to understand how suicide is connected to mental health and how that is different than what other emergency services would interact with. We're just starting to understand that better as a whole.
I think, yes, you're exactly right. Because if you think about mental health, psychology is so young. I mean, we're talking about things that I could diagnose somebody with from the DSM, the book that we use to diagnose people with different situations. There are things in there that were crimes in the 1970s because people just didn't understand it. They didn't look at all the pieces. So I think it's a very young issue that we're looking at, if I can say it that way.
Yeah.
And so I think, we're a little bit behind, and it's kind of hard to see all the sides of something when our view of it is changing.
Yeah.
So
let's talk a little bit about how it works, just because I think we hit on that a bit, but I think there are some interesting details around it. When you dial the number, it does. The one thing I saw is that it uses your area code
and location,
to find
try to route you.
Which my first thought with that was a lot of people have their cell phone number that they just carry wherever they are. So I wonder if it has the same location services as
or maybe like
911, but that's not really for us
tower
to.
you pinged off.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But either way, it does route you, and it tries to route you to a local call center, and if it can't get through, it goes somewhere else, which is good. So you're not just getting a busy signal or something like that. And it seems like now I was reading there's a article on the Washington Post about this, and it was talking about that they'll send out certain teams if they need to help with that, but I don't know if that's something that's just rolling out in bigger cities right now, and it's going to come to smaller areas. I don't know. I'm not sure if any of you have or fully researched it.
I mean, just from personal experience,
Yeah.
with using it, when you call, if there is like an imminent emergency, they will connect to, like we talked about, like there are trained officers. Not all of our officers are trained, but the ones that they're marked as being trained in crisis intervention, and so
Okay.
there is a specific team. There are specific teams and people in Omaha that deal with these specific calls, and so they will get called to that location.
Okay, so this article actually says the hotline in Tuscan is the example is widely considered the gold standard for comprehensive care of people suffering from mental health crises. When someone calls the city's hotline, trained counselors help resolve the emergency on the phone 80% of the time. If they cannot, one of 16 mobile crisis teams is dispatched to the caller's door. So this is maybe, like they said, the gold standard is probably that scenario isn't
something
play
like
out the same everywhere, but maybe we're working like we already have fire trucks, police cars, and ambulances we send out. Hopefully we're working to a place where there's just that fourth response that can happen.
Yeah. And like I said, I think that's part of what is the name of the organization that meets here? And we had her on that's doing the crisis intervention training with
That's
the police officers.
Yeah.
Or is that just what it's called?
Yeah.
Crisis intervention training. And so they're one of their goals, I think, and she talked about it, is most police officers, or firefighters or whatever, they sign up for a job not to be getting into the mental health profession. And so sometimes they feel not equipped to go to the calls that they're assigned to, whether it's like someone having a mental health breakdown or whatever. And, as a person, maybe that's a bystander on a scene, you don't know how to diagnose that or what's going on. You just see somebody acting violent or, having problems and maybe breaking the law or doing something that makes you fearful. So then automatically you'd call 911. They'd send up a police officer out there without a lot of great information. So I do think as a collective and as a nation, we're trying to figure out how do we continue to address these and train as many officers as we can in that type of stuff. But at the same time, like it's hard to be an expert in everything and chasing down bad guys and all of those kind of things, but also being able to make pretty split second decisions on a person's mental health and how do we best serve it. And so hopefully that population as a whole, I think we've seen a lot of articles, even in our own city over the last few years of, the mistreatment of somebody. And I think mostly because of ignorance of somebody who had a mental health crisis and we didn't realize it until after the fact. And then all of a sudden, I don't think anybody wants that. I don't think police officers want that. They want to be equipped. And obviously as a society, we don't want those things happening.
Well, I mean, it's just good to see that we're realizing that, the services we have maybe aren't equipped correctly for the response. I mean, you wouldn't send, you can't, obviously a police officer could show up to a fire. Maybe they can try to help get somebody out of there, but they're not equipped like the fire truck is with hoses and ladders. You know what I mean? So it's just something we can almost look at it as pragmatically as that is, yes, we just need to send out people who are equipped to handle these situations.
Yeah, the right tools make all the difference for sure.
And I think unfortunately it's been proven that this is a need. And so I think this is a great resource to fill that need. And I also, just speaking for our crisis intervention training that Christ Community hosts for the Omaha Police and lots of other people come, those people are choosing to come. Like those people are paying for themselves or getting a scholarship or a grant to get training. Like they want to be there. And I think I just think that's incredible that it's not like, oh, I have to do this and I have to go to this call. It's like, I care about this and I care about understanding people holistically, not just in maybe like the middle of a crime or a moment. And so the right people are doing the job and we are creating that way for people to use their gifts and to get help. But unfortunately, it's like a need has been obviously identified by the high rates of
right. Well, because
suicide and
that's
everything
kind of
like
leads
that.
into our next talking point is that the rates of depression and suicide are obviously on the rise. It's something that gets talked about a lot. I think the pandemic put a spotlight on that, and for people who are maybe even in a little bit of denial of that happening, I think we just saw a rise of it because of the pandemic, and we also just took time to acknowledge it more. What do we think is contributing to that, though? The pandemic was something we could point to, but overall, are there other things that we think in society are causing this rise in depression and suicide?
I think without a doubt, and we had it recently. Right now, our staff is going through some trainings with some city care counselors where they're bringing in to talk about anxiety and mental health and things like that. One, with our staff, so we have an awareness and we can be watching out for our own souls, but also because we deal with people. And so I know one of the city care counselors, Nate Theodore, talked about just undeniably social media being a part of that, because you're constantly seeing other people's lives and you're constantly having the opportunity to compare. And so you're seeing lies probably about other people that aren't full truths about what they look like, what their lives are actually like. And then you start to compare, my life is not that good. Or you see, your friends. I've seen a lot of middle schoolers when I was a middle school pastor. Man, there was so much tension and drama about seeing your friends all hanging out, FOMO, and then you not being there.
Yeah.
And so then you start to write these scripts of like, why wasn't I there? Why didn't I get invited? And there might be a really good reason, and they weren't trying to leave you out, but then all of a sudden, you start to feel lonely and isolated. And obviously, I think from our worldview, there's an enemy that wants to just capitalize on that and make you buy into the lies that you don't have value, that nobody cares about you. And, so just one of those kind of pictures, you could be having a great day, had an awesome day, just triggered instantly by seeing, some of those pictures. And so I think undoubtedly, and I'm a huge advocate for social media and redeeming it and the power that the gospel can have through it. But at the same time, there's an enemy that wants to capitalize on it too.
Well, I think even if you look at trends on TikTok, you see a lot of people that are trying to help you self-diagnose your issue, whether it's ADHD or whatever. And the further we go down these tracks, the more labels we create, and we are able to kind of self-label ourselves as this and whatever that might be. And I mean, this is armchair therapist over here trying to just understand the world a little better. But I do wonder if sometimes we're very good at identifying the problems and pointing those problems out, but we're not always great at either taking accountability for ourselves, with personal responsibility to better ourselves when we identify those problems, or even the people who are identifying those problems, acknowledging that there either is or isn't a solution to those issues. I mean, I'd be curious, even Jess, what you think about that. Is that something, and I know you can't give details about that, but when you are maybe counseling with someone, do you have kind of a roadmap for that? Like, yes, we've identified these problems, but that doesn't dictate who you are.
Yeah.
That isn't you.
Oh, yeah.
That's just a problem you're having. We can work past it. Because I feel like everybody's building their identities around their mental health issues, and that becomes their person of their identity, and it's like, how do we move past that?
I think one big mistake that we're making right now is the self-diagnosis, because you're looking at, if you're watching a reel of constantly ADHD TikTok videos, your symptoms and things that you do in your life, you're going to feel like that's what you're doing. And so when you're labeling yourself as one thing, I think that can be very detrimental.
Hypochondria for a mental health issue.
It's very detrimental. We'll just say that. And I never, ever will see somebody for the first time and say, you have ADHD or you have anxiety and depression. I always rule out, because there's so many symptoms that go into saying like you have depression or you have anxiety. And it's really, to me, it's honoring yourself by not labeling, by being more curious. And I think that's why therapy is so helpful, because it's like you're an unbiased person is looking at you and how you're feeling and your symptoms and saying, hey, like, and asking questions you wouldn't have thought of. So that's, I'm always doing that. And I definitely use different assessments for anxiety and depression and stress, like
Yeah.
in my first couple sessions with people, just so like let's see what your whole picture is. And I feel like that's just a way we can honor ourselves and other people. Like I wouldn't label you on the street as something. And so I'm really try to honor people even in those settings of like, okay, let's like really dig through it and get answers that are validating, because I think that's where, when we know and then we're validated in that, then we can start healing and building onto stuff. But it's a dangerous thing to
even in
start
things like
doing that.
Alcoholics Anonymous. Am I correct in hearing like that you're kind of labeled? You're like, once you're an alcoholic, you're just kind of always labeled. Like that's the way they even almost teach you to think about it. Like you're an alcoholic, and I wonder, like, I understand the thought behind that, but it's like, is that almost detrimental in the long haul? Like for someone who has recovered, to just, I mean, is that actually? I'm just curious what the thought is behind that. Is that actually beneficial for them to hold them accountable to that, to just consider themselves, I'm an alcoholic, or is there a point where we're like, you know what? No, I'm past that. I'm not. That isn't my identity anymore. Like, is that helpful as well?
I think for Alcoholics Anonymous, it's an accountability thing. It's part of the 12 steps in the big book, and so that's a very like precise, and that's like specifically like one area.
That's just one, yeah. But that doesn't apply across other ways that people are, because I think the thing is, when you're identifying as something, it's so hard to sometimes separate like your habits and your personal actions that you choices you make from that, because now you've said, this is what I am.
Yeah. And I just want to say, like, I'm just one therapist. Like, I do not have it all together. But when someone is
I don't mean to put you on the spot, like you're the answer
Okay.
to everybody, but I just think you have a really good insight to this.
So Eric, say you came into my office and you were like, I'm depressed, I'm this and that. Like, one of my first things to say is like, that's a fact about you. That is not necessarily who you are. This is part of your life. These are facts about you, because we make these diagnosis things that we see such a part of our identity. And I think that that's why we get depressed, and why sometimes that suicide feels like the only option, because the hopelessness is gone when I make that my identity.
Yeah, right.
And I think that we can fill that void with anything. I mean, we've said social media, and I think comparison is a big thing, but I also think trauma is hard, and like not addressing that. I mean, there's some deep stuff that, you know, might have happened years ago that you're not dealing with, but it comes out in different ways. And so I think this is, to me, like a very tender thing to not jump the gun on.
Yeah.
But my first thing is just, to be curious about people, but
That's really
definitely
helpful.
like, it's a fact about you. It's not who you are.
That's a good definition.
I would point out, you mentioned trauma, Jess, the 24-hour news cycle too, probably being a huge contributor to this, because, I mean, how many people, you know, watched George Floyd get murdered? You know, I mean, how many kids, how many people just came across it on the internet because there's the access. And so those are points of trauma for somebody to witness that, whether you were actually physically there, but you witnessed it, and then we don't deal with the trauma, and then we, you know, there become all these traumatizing things, or maybe for a lot of people that triggered another point of trauma in their life. And there's all these trigger points, but we've become better and better at stuffing these things, or that's just, it's normal to see people die.
Desensitized.
Yeah, it's normal to traumatic things happening and seeing traumatic things in your life. It's just become normative. And before a 24-hour, you know, news media cycle, you just didn't have that many points of probably, I mean, people did in their lives, but the average person probably didn't have to deal with trauma and putting it in their face, but then just kind of moving on, you know, to the next thing without ever dealing with it or calling it trauma. And so I think that's it. I haven't talked to many people that, you know, went on vacation and didn't hear the news and were like, my life wasn't better, you know? And I think we should be informed. There's things to be informed about, but there is this desire in us to like stay so up to date and to click that, warning sign that's like, hey, this is a graphic video, and it almost entices you more to go watch that video, and then you don't really deal with like the trauma from that. And I think there's a lot of people with unknowingly undiagnosed trauma, and then there's triggers, and then you don't know where that trauma came from and how it's triggering. And so I know, even again, to reference Nate, who talked in our with our staff, was just that idea of like putting an age to it and naming when some of those trauma points happened in your life. And so that's why I think even a lot of this mental health, and I think the stigma's gone away, which is good in a lot of ways, to mental health and getting counseling and saying it's okay. And so I think we've made a lot of headway in the last decade towards mental health. But at the same time, the rates are not going down either. And so that cause and effect, I think we'll continue to see.
Oh, just one more thing I just want to say about trauma is that a lot of times when we're talking about trauma, I'll even, if I asked you like, hey, like what trauma has been in your life, you're going to think of specific things that have happened, and they're probably going to be bigger, or they're going to be like a death or something you saw. But it's also like, hey, like what was repeatedly said to you as a child? Like, what have you seen? Like, have you seen a family member that was sexually abused, like go through their trauma? There's so many different ways that trauma can affect us. So I think a lot of times people will downplay the fact that there has been trauma in their life because it's hard to identify it, and it's hard to, we think that these things count and these things don't. And I think that that's another thing that's changing with mental health is like, hey, this stuff I've been writing off, like it does bother me. And so I think the trauma circle is a lot bigger than I witnessed a car accident or somebody get murdered. I mean, there's things that somebody might say, oh, that's nothing. That's a huge thing in your life and has turned into this belief or something that's a huge trigger for you.
It's so easy to downplay someone else's experience when it's not your own. And I think so much of America's culture specifically is that self-reliance, and your value comes from how well you can rely on yourself and not others. And so admitting that you're having mental health issues immediately takes you out of that. And I think if there's a fear, I think among people, and probably rightfully so in some ways, I mean, not in a good way, but I understand why people would have this fears, because the moment you admit that weakness, like you're going to get classified, you're going to be put in a box, and people are going to look at you in a certain way, even if they're going through the same thing, but it's almost like this point of pride to even not admit that you have those problems. And I mean, to me, that's really tragic, and hopefully we can work past that.
And to me, it's like, there's always hope.
Yeah.
And I think we forget about that. And another thing I'll say is like, if someone is feeling very low, one of the first things I think is like, halt. So are you hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? And a lot of times when you're those four things, you're going to make a decision you wouldn't, or you're going to go into a depressive state, or you're going to look at pornography, or you're going to abuse somebody, or it's going to be whatever that is. But it's hungry, angry, lonely, tired is usually like a first sign that like, okay, or even it could even be like, I'm going to snap and be irritable at my husband or my wife. Like, am I hungry, angry, lonely, tired? You're probably one of those four things.
Yeah.
And when you've got the cocktail going on, sometimes I've got the hungry, angry, and tired cocktail, and that is a real recipe for disaster.
Yeah. So as we start to wrap this up, like where do we see the church's role in some of this? I mean, obviously having a resource like this, I don't think the church should be afraid to use that. And when when you're meeting with someone who's dealing with this, that's a great resource to have, that number, the hotline 988. But what other responses do you see? Is there a way the church could show better how to value life, and how? Because I mean, I think when I grew up as a kid in the church, suicide was one, extremely taboo, and there was also only kind of like one answer to it. Like if someone committed suicide, that meant that was like the worst, one of the worst sins you could do, right? That was just the way it was thought about. At least those conversations are changing now. But where is the church responsible for, where can we lead in that, I guess, lead our culture well, lead society well in this?
I would say make more attempts to be trauma informed, because I think when someone comes, especially to the church, you're getting so many people. You're expected to have an answer too, right?
Yeah.
So somebody's emailing Alex, and Alex is like, not to put you on the spot, but it's just like you have to have some kind of response. Like you have to have some kind of answer. And so I think being trauma informed, taking the steps to even look at, like, Google that and look what that means of just understanding people's trauma. And then I think welcoming other options of, like, even offering, like, hey, maybe you should talk to a therapist, or looking at different options, I think is one step.
Yeah, I think we get to sit in a lot of ways on a luxury ship. Not that we do everything perfect here at Christ Community, but I mean, being in proximity to City Care has not automatically, but has just created more of an awareness of this reality. You know, having Jess, weekly talk to us about this, having other counselors come in and talk, and just having them in proximity. One, it says we value this, as a church. I remember during the pandemic specifically, we said, man, any nurse, any healthcare professional that wants some mental health, like we'll take care of the bill, because we want to care for people. And so to me, I think just talking about it, being in proximity, normalizing those kinds of things, getting yourself around people that are actual, not the, side armchair therapists, not the TikTok diagnosers, but getting yourself around, real professionals who do this with their lives, I think is something we need to be aware of. And I think talking about it, I think one of our passions and why this podcast exists, one of the reasons is to have conversations about what's happening in culture and how that affects, our walk with Jesus and Christianity. And we get to share stories. We want to be a resource that talks about these real types of things. And so as we've had this conversation, I think of just 3 episodes, one of them was with Becky Hancock, who we talked about with crisis intervention. And she talks about, the police and in our local area, and so we got to talk to her about that. We had a guy named...
That was episode 94?
Yeah, 94. Episode 113, we had a guy named Phil come share his story about, depression and suicide and things like that, and he was able to share that story in his own way. We talked about sexual trauma, so not just trauma in general, but we kind of defined trauma and just brought an awareness that these things happen in our lives, and we just have to uncover them and say them out loud. That was episode 132. For those that are just wanting more on, trauma, and small things in your life can trigger sexual trauma. And so I think one of the things I love about this medium is we're able to have those discussions. And hopefully put out content that's story-driven, that's building empathy, that's doing all those things to put people in proximity that, is maybe taboo. We're not going to maybe get to preach on it on a Sunday morning. And so I think those are ways that church can help. And practically, I think another one I saw in one of those articles is they need volunteers. Like these hotlines that people are calling they want to train. There's paid professionals, but they want people to train, and that you're sitting, like you could save someone's life every day in a small practical way by doing this and volunteering, at the Boys Town National Hotline that, like you mentioned, Jess, that's our local one. And so just practically, hey, maybe that's a place you can go give some of your time. And I don't know exactly how that all works as far as volunteering, but
can I give one last nugget? Just from a spiritual perspective, because obviously, like, all on board with mental health, but if you're thinking, if you're being triggered by something, like even just like a great way to like pray is just inviting the Holy Spirit like into a moment. And so I call it, this is actually like myself and other counselors actually at City Care use this too, like, because obviously we all struggle. And so it's called SIFT. So it's praying and it's like, God, what sensations am I feeling around this trauma when it comes up? What images do I see? What feelings do I have? What thoughts am I having? And then it's, God, please like bring healing to that. What image do you want to replace? What sensation do you want me to feel? What thoughts do you want me to have? And so I think that there's huge power in prayer, and I think that that's also like a first step to being mindful and to even like bringing a different perspective to a hard situation you might be going through. And so this isn't maybe like the end all be all answer, but I think it's like part of the puzzle piece that you can add into maybe something you're not doing, or a different way to pray through hurts that you're having. So
that's really good.
To use that.
All right. Well, on that note, I think that really wraps things up well. Thanks to everyone who is listening. Thanks, Jess and Alex, for being here and having this conversation. If you are listening and you'd like to reach out to us, you can do that on social media at CCC Omaha, or you can send us an email to podcast@cccomaha.org. But until next time, we'll talk to you then.